This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your fridge with a pussy magnet.
Welcome, welcome, my lovely lumps. Or maybe let's go with lovely labs. That's pretty on brand. Anyway, I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge. We're going to be yarning about all things sexuality, intimacy, womanhood, relating, holistic health, and everything in between. We're going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up because you're about to receive the sex ed that you never had and hopefully have a bit of a chuckle while you're at it. Before we get stuck in, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. It's a massive privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content in Naarm, and I just want to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if you're ready, let's flap and do this.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up the couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
Hey gang, just before we jump into this episode, I wanted to offer you an opportunity to access my new mini course for free before I start charging for it in future. It's for people with vulvas and it's quick to complete. It's all about demystifying the female body and pleasure anatomy and getting some basic fundamentals to understand your body better. It's called Pussy Pleasure Secrets, Your Roadmap to Bedroom Bliss. You can grab it on the freebies page of my website or in the show notes. It's a great little free resource to kind of dip your toe in or act as a bit of a taster for my work. So if you've ever been curious about this sort of thing and you just don't know where to start, or you want a really quick, easy, accessible, non-threatening way to get the ball rolling and start working on this stuff, this is a great place to start. Hello, my labial love bugs. Welcome back to the lounge. You might notice that I am quite husky today. I'm going to try to pull through this episode. Hopefully it's not too torturous to listen to, but I had my brother's wedding and then a music festival on the weekend, so have been talking over loud music quite a lot. But today I've got a guest who's a pioneer in the field of energy medicine and human consciousness, and the best-selling author of The Secret Language of Your Body, translated into 27 different languages and sold over 1 million copies worldwide. Her name's Inna Segal. Have I pronounced the last name correctly?
Inna Segal, yeah.
Segal, okay, I didn't pronounce it correctly. So Inna Segal, her journey began after years of illness and the tragic stillbirth of her child, which led her to discover a profound ability to heal herself. From that turning point, she dedicated her life to helping others transform pain into freedom. For over 25 years, Inna has worked with people worldwide, from doctors and psychologists to trauma survivors and creatives, teaching how to uncover the true roots of suffering and restore health through the wisdom of the body and soul. Welcome, Inna.
Thank you. So good to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat about this. I'm curious about your sort of journey that set you off on this path. I know that your exploration into intuitive healing began with some personal health challenges. And I'd just love, before we get into what the secret language of the body even is, for you to share how these experiences that you've had led you to develop your healing methodologies and how your personal life experiences, some of which sound incredibly horrific and sad and tragic, kind of shaped the work that you do today.
So for me it was a combination of many events and experiences, and I really feel like it started with my grandparents actually had an extremely traumatic experience when they were younger. My grandmother's mother basically actually was was a clairvoyant in the early 1900s and said to my grandmother, who would have been 12 at the time, look, the war's coming and you are going to be the only one who survives from all the children. She had 8 children. She would have been maybe 30 at the time or 31. and your father will survive for a little while after the war. And my grandmother, I don't know how you hear it, but she did, and essentially, her mother was being shot when my grandmother was 13 a year later, as she was running to save her life. So, and then my grandfather ended up in Siberia in a work camp in minus 50 Celsius half of the time for something he didn't do for 10 years. His family didn't even know if he was alive, and then they kind of never spoke about this until maybe 50 years later. They told each other, and they said they whispered about it, and it was really interesting because on that ancestral trauma level, I found that I was born with digestive issues, and pretty much there is no one in the family who doesn't have them. And obviously I didn't know this at the beginning because you know that's not something anybody teaches you, you're aware of. But when I was 6, I remember just having not being able to go to the toilet or ending up in a hospital with people not knowing what to do. And then when we came to Australia, I was 10 at the time, and I experienced pretty intensive bullying for being from Eastern Europe and not speaking the language. And all of a sudden, I went from this really quite a happy child with, even though I had these digestive issues, but still very, very happy, very outgoing, to completely shut down, crying every single day, terrified of going to school because, I was hit, things were thrown in my face. Like, that was my experience of Australia, and within a very short time of coming to Australia and going to this particular school, I developed psoriasis all over my skin, which was also something that my family had. Eventually, my parents they kind of went, well, maybe if we put you into private school, you'll be in a much better situation. And so they did. And what they didn't realize was that now I wasn't bullied for not being able to speak English, because I could speak English by that time. But I was bullied for the fact that I came from, a family that didn't have money, and I could only be with people or friends that didn't have that, who were like me, similar background. And all of us, I reflected on this, would walk around this particular school in this self-protect mode. And some of them, like, even now, will not talk about that school. They're just so traumatized by what actually happened there as well, and how we were treated from a different perspective. So I started developing back pain from around that time. I just felt like I wasn't really supported at home. I found the school to be difficult in a very different way. The teachers also felt like, some of the teachers we had, for instance, no matter how good we were at English, and that was, I was a writer, like that was the thing that I wanted to do. So no matter how good I was at writing my essays, I would only get a C+. And finally, and same with all my friends. And finally, one of the parents said, well, the girls are so intelligent, like, why do you keep giving them C+? And I would actually write for my other friends in other classes and then get A+ based on my writing. So I was like, this is ridiculous. And essentially the teacher said, well, because, they weren't born here, so there's no way that I'm going to give them anything beyond C+. So it was really interesting for me, where I just felt like, since I came to Australia, I just kept getting kind of pushed down. And yeah, I just didn't know how to cope with that type of experience. I ended up getting to a point where I think, my body was just starting to fall apart. I was going to physios, I was going to doctors, because that's what my mom knew at the time. And then eventually I met my first partner, and in an acting class, and he was really open to alternative medicine. So he started taking me to a lot of different practitioners. One of them was a chiropractor who kind of worked a lot on the nervous system, and I'd been seeing him for about a year, and during that time, I'd had an experience of stillbirth, as you mentioned, which was really traumatic on levels, again, that I didn't know, existed. And so essentially, at that point, I just, my back was not allowing me to really, walk forward. I couldn't move forward. I really felt like I was in this state of extreme stuckness, depression, anxiety, feeling like, what's the point of life, and essentially I remember thinking for quite a period of time, I want to die. That's what I want to experience. So that didn't help my health. And I ended up in this chiropractor's office, and on this particular day, because I just woke up and I was in agony, and after seeing him for over a year, I think he realized that something needed to change, that he needed to do some kind of a shake-up for me. And he basically, I just said to him, look, what are you going to do to help me? Because I'm in a lot of pain. And he just looked at me and he said, well, your body's really stuck. And I said, yeah, I know that part. And he just said, I really don't think I can do much for you at this point. You need to, I'm sorry, go home type of, that was the meaning of it. Just like, you've got to take some responsibility for your own health is what I feel he meant by it. But I was so super angry on the way home. Yet there was this part of me that I had been studying linguistics at the time, and I just kept kind of going, wow, how is my body and my mind not connected? Because in my mind, it's ridiculous. I obviously don't want to be sick. But my body it's like something I have zero understanding of, zero connection with, because it's speaking Chinese or Japanese or some language where Korean, where I cannot, I don't even know what the letters mean. And so I went home and I was like, the thing that I have never really tried is this responsibility, in a sense. I've never tried to connect with my body. I've never tried to really communicate with it or to heal it in any way besides going to somebody else and thinking they had all the answers, and clearly they don't. Not for me, And so I ended up essentially in a very rough way connecting to my body through breath, through touch. And as I was doing that, it just occurred to me, and it was a really tough thing for me to even consider this, but the thought that came was, well, maybe you should ask for divine help, because maybe you need much more than human kind of help. But at the same time, my mind was kind of going, well, why would you have a 20, you would have a baby that died? Like, it makes no sense if there was such a thing as divine. So I asked anyway, and I started having this warmth go through my body. And, from there, for whatever reason, it occurred to me to ask if I could see into my body. Again, I had zero expectations, but within a few moments, I could see my spine and my back. And from there, I just started saying, why do I have this? Not from this perspective of, I'm the victim, I don't know anything, but from wanting to know and from real curiosity. And it was incredible because all of the things that I've just talked about showed up, and I went, oh my God, now I have much more understanding about why I have all of the conditions that I have, from from the school, from my grandparents, from the fact that I was just this spongy person. I just take on other people's energy, and I felt through it. I cried, I fell asleep. The next day I woke up, and throughout the whole experience and the night, I felt this unwinding of intense tension inside my back in particular. So when I woke up, about 70% of the pain was gone, but I'm a skeptic by nature. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to keep exploring this. I'm a writer, so I'm going to get my journal. I'm going to write it. I'm going to start to connect the pieces of it as much as possible. And so I did that for several weeks. And then I literally had no back pain, and also the psoriasis, which was pretty unpleasant, uncomfortable, intense, was totally disappeared. So it was very clearly a physical change and a shift. And I also realized that I could see into people's bodies. And so that's kind of where it all came from. A very long story.
Wow. So there might be some people who are listening to this feeling skeptical or feeling like, oh, well, that worked for her, but it won't work for me, or I can't develop, the ability to see into bodies and energy and, all of this sort of thing. Because I know, I've done a lot of stuff in the past of like Bruce Lipton's biology of belief and visualizations and sort of using meditation and visualization to kind of go inside the body and try to, on a cellular level, like heal or rearrange or whatever. And I must say, none of it's ever worked for me, and I find it incredibly difficult to actually believe that it will work for me, which is probably part of the problem, and very difficult to even stick with it long enough to feel like I'm getting anywhere or feel as though I have access to an experience like the one you've described. I've heard a lot of people describe experiences like this. I know that they happen and that they're real. But for those listening that are like me and are like, yeah, look, I don't think that everybody's capable of that, or that is not a language that I speak or that makes sense to me. Can you tell us what the secret language of the body is and like where we would even begin our healing?
I think, for a lot of people, we've been desensitized, and that's what you're basically saying. We're so, a lot of us have, including myself, have grown up just focused in terms of our heads, and we're like, when I want results, I want this. And part of the issue that actually, connects to this is that because we're desensitized, our nervous system is actually not flexible. And when it's not flexible, and for me, the reason that I really believe that it happened in that way and happened so quick in that experience was that I was actually going to see somebody 3 times a week for a year to work on my nervous system. So internally, when I did ask those questions, I had already, my body was prepared. I didn't come from that unpreparedness. And I think if you come from a place of I'm just not prepared, then it is very, very easy to have the experience that you're talking about, because that's what I would have had 100%. Had there been no preparation. And so how to prepare is a huge thing, because you can do that from many different places. One, going to somebody who literally, like this chiropractor that I went to for over a year at the time, he never cracked anything. In fact, he hardly touched my body. And he would just talk about how he'd work with the nervous system to release the blockages inside the nervous system so that I would create this new internal connection, and so that the body could start to communicate. Now, for a year, right, 3 times a week is quite a bit of time to to then be able to really have that connection. Plus, I was studying acting and doing a lot of breathing techniques and things like that when I would go to those classes, as well as visualization. And I do believe that when your body is not ready, it is very, very difficult. And you kind of have to make a decision. Either, like you said, either you go, okay, this is not for me, because there is no other way around it. Like, you either need somebody to work with you, or you need to do that work first, which is you need to go. Like, I had a client once, and she was 27 when she came to see me, and she had fibromyalgia by this stage. She was in pain all the time. She had anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue by 27. And it essentially took her 2 years of doing the exercises to start to feel anything or see anything. And I totally get that it can be, 2 years of doing something daily without seeing results. For most people, they would just go, no, this is not working for me, I'm going to quit. But for her, after 2 years, she actually opened up abilities like mine, and she's incredible at tuning into other people and herself now. She's probably getting closer to 40 now, because it's been a while since that time. And, she became a healer. She was able to transform all her conditions, but it wasn't instant. And so it's that thing of, what you're willing to do. What I do with people who are, in order to start to connect to the body, is to actually, again, I would never say to somebody who would, who's new at it and doesn't know how to really connect to the body, to go, okay, close your eyes and let's connect to it, because it's never going to work. So I get people to move their bodies first. So in the preparation, I would say, okay, let's stand. And I'll say, okay, close your eyes and become aware of where you are numbing or where you don't feel things, and place your hands on that part of your body. And then we're just going to start by breathing into that part of your body and exploring sensations. And because to sensitize yourself to even start to connect to that language we're speaking about, you need to actually create some connection with your body, because that's the point. You're not connected, right? And so by going, okay, well, I'm feeling numb, or people say, I don't feel anything. Whenever they say they don't feel anything, I'm like, okay, what does not feeling anything feel like? And if we, is it numbness? What is the sensation that you're talking about? And if we, let's say, if we could give a color to that not feeling anything or numbness, what color would it be? Would it be black, brown, white, whatever it is? If we could give a shape to it, what would it be? And then I would say, okay, with your hands, I want you to imagine, because I don't want people just to be stuck in their thinking and visualization. I actually want them to use their whole body. So if you could take that out, but before you do, if you could connect it to a particular thought, for instance, could there be a thought connected to this experience of, numbness, and the thought maybe, I don't want to feel this, which is for most people, like, they don't feel things because they don't want to feel it, because it's traumatic to feel. So, would it be, can we just start to peel that layer off and literally with your hands take it off? And maybe we visualize, maybe people cannot visualize, and it's like, I just go, okay, take it out. And now we're just going to, let's say you can't visualize yet. We're just going to shake that arm out with the intention of letting go, while repeating the word clear, with that intention of, I'm clearing, I am letting this go. And then we're going to do it again, and we're going to see if we can go a little deeper into this numbness and into this, exploration, into, can we discover something? And obviously the other reason people don't is because it's not safe to. And we have this capacity to scan others and go, is it safe? Is this person, do they know what they're doing? Can I trust them, to guide me? And so that's a huge, huge part of it. I think even medicine now understands, and I say this because they're last to understand anything. Even they start to understand that traumatic, difficult, painful experiences from your life can affect you as just the absolute obvious thing, and can affect your emotions, can affect your hormonal system, can affect your nervous system, your immune system. All of this can be affected by really, really difficult experiences. Now, on the other hand, I'm pretty sure that any logical person would say if you are in an environment that is toxic, or you are taking toxins into your body, that's also going to have a massive cause in terms of why somebody doesn't feel well. And that if we really want to look at things holistically, then we need to know ourselves, our bodies, and we also need to eat better, and we need to detox, and we need to make decisions as we start to understand things, because we often make decisions because we don't understand something, right? As we start to understand things, we start to make better decisions in terms of how do we live our lives. And the language of the body essentially is happening every day. How do you feel? Do you feel good? Do you feel bad? Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel stressed? Do you feel stuck? Do you feel fearful? Do you feel sad? Right? All of this is the language of the body saying something to us. And then every disease, every pain, every experience of where it is in the body is giving us a storyline connected both to how we, what we're eating, and, our environment and our emotions, essentially, and our thought patterns, as well as, thoughts and emotions lead to actions. So it's like, what is our perception of life? How are we perceiving things?
Hey, baby babes. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to pop my head into the lounge here and mention another virtual lounge that I'd love you to get around. It's the Labia Lounge Facebook group that I've created for listeners of the poddy to mingle in. There you'll find extra bits and bobs like freebies, behind the scenes, or discounts for offerings from guests who have been interviewed on the podcast. There'll also be, hopefully, inspiring, thought-provoking conversations and support from a community of labial legends like yourself. My vision for this is that it becomes a really supportive, educational, and hilarious resource for you to have more access to me and a safe space to ask questions you can't ask anywhere else. So head over to the links in the show notes or look up the Labia Lounge group in Facebook, and I'll see you in there. And now, back to the episode. Do you have a sex education anecdote for us?
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise?
I just felt like when I was at school that essentially it was so dry, the whole thing, and and everybody kind of just made fun of it, and you kind of sit in this sex education type of thing at school, and you're just so uncomfortable and laughing at it, and it was almost a little bit like, humiliating, and so to me, you kind of go, you laugh at it, it's funny, and then you forget everything. And you don't really learn anything in particular about, how do you have pleasure? People don't really understand that. And so you're actually trying to talk about it with your friends who also have no clue. And then I found, like, for me, especially when I was at school in that younger time of learning about it, all my friends lied. That was really interesting to me, that all my friends actually told me they had sexual experiences when they hadn't, which I found interesting because what it did for me, it made me go, oh, well, if they've had it, then, I should have it. And I think that I ended up having my first experiences way too young because everyone was saying, I've already had it and I've tried it. And then I found out years later that they hadn't. And so that was really interesting, and kind of a little bit traumatic to later go, oh my God, why did you lie to
I
me?
know. And I think that still happens a lot, in particular with boys, because I know it's a bit of a status symbol, especially for teenage boys. It's like a conquest, and look at me, I've, done this thing. And so it would not surprise me if boys were lying because it's cool and you want to belong and you don't want to be uncool or behind the pack. But I'm surprised that, yeah, your girlfriend's lied about that. And it is really sad that because of that sort of social pressure, you rushed yourself and there wasn't even any need to do that. And yeah, that's really unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that. Um, I wanted to ask, like, sort of, it was on something you mentioned earlier about, yeah, women and sort of boundaries and how we've been socialized as women and how that's shifting, but that now we're sort of expected to do everything and be hyper, productive and quite masculine, but then also still be feminine enough and sexy and blah, blah, blah. What do you think, like, in terms of correlation between women being conditioned to feel like we aren't allowed to have boundaries and we've got to be people pleasing and self sacrificing? Um, the correlation between that and getting sick, because I feel like not only most people are very disconnected from their bodies, but that also means we're really disconnected from, I guess, our true sort of needs and even feeling as though we're allowed to have needs and boundaries and desires. You mentioned pleasure. Um, so there's not a lot of body awareness. And then there's also not a lot of boundaries or self worth. How does that turn into illness in the body?
Yeah, that's a huge question. Well, I think when we look at those types of things, we start to see those issues showing up in in terms of boundaries in particular. It often shows up in the throat or the thyroid, or, oh my God, I can't communicate, or even the neck, because you're pushing it down and you're going, like you said, with people pleasing, oh my God, I'm going to, like, I need to people please. I need to please my, this person, and that person. And then I have nothing left. So it shows up with numbness in the heart. It shows up as absolute exhaustion. It shows up as connecting to your partner and, sometimes being reactive and not having all the feminine, if we speak about the feminine, has so many colors and flavors, and really connecting to somebody with that more of reactive way, which then shuts you down more, or overdoing it and then not realizing, why you're angry. And then that affects your digestive system. And then, it really affects your reproductive system. And I think that so many women feel, when they have their periods, they feel it. That's what we're talking about in terms of that aggression, because now you're not suppressing it. And so it comes up in your body and you just feel so angry. And, and so many of the reproductive issues when I've worked with women come from that experience of being put down, or overdoing it or overgiving it, and obviously the chest and the breasts as well.
Mm. Yeah, so I see that all the time turning up in women's cycle symptoms. Um, yeah, an inability to look out for their own needs and their boundaries and to advocate for themselves and protect their energy like one of the first places or signs that that's having an impact, or where that shows up, tends to be with PMS and period kind of related symptoms. So I totally back that. Just anecdotally, it's funny. It's such a shame there's not, like you were saying, medicine's often like the last place to get on board with these things that, usually get labeled as pseudoscience or woo woo. But and it is tricky. It's tricky to sort of study. There's not a lot of research. Um, but I do feel like without like a scientific, I don't know, proof that this is real, I have just a real intuitive sense or belief that, things show up in the body that originate not in that part of the body, very much in their experiences, their trauma, their emotions, and their thought patterns, their belief systems. So we know that we have to do the prep work and try to get in attunement with our bodies and our nervous system. What are some of the other steps that people can take, or that you encourage clients to work with in order to begin healing themselves? Say they've got chronic illnesses or pain conditions, for instance, that you suspect originate from somewhere that, isn't strictly medical or strictly physical. Where do we start, and how do you talk to them about this?
Well, usually, as I think I said earlier, we start with making sure the body is prepared as much as possible. And from that place of movement and preparation and awakening the body, we will go, I will say, okay, let's pick the area of the body where you have the most pain or discomfort, and place your hands on that part and start breathing into that area, and again exploring the different sensations, and then moving through, if there were beliefs, and not just one but several, where what are they, and then we might go, well, where did you hear that, where does this come from, and then moving to, is this connected to some emotions, and if we could acknowledge these emotions, what would they be? And if we're starting to do that, can we also connect to particular, situations and experiences that may have led to this? And as we're doing that, we also start to acknowledge and as I was saying, energetically start to let go of this. And we use our imagination, visualization, touch, breath, movement, color. We will work with the energetic aspect of it, and people without a doubt say to me, oh my God, I felt such a difference, and so on. And then I'll say to people at one point, as we're exploring, where did it start? Did it start in this part of the body or in a different part of the body, which I think you're referring to? And they'll move, and I'll say, just allow your body to show this to you and move your hands to that part. And this is where a lot of emotions will come up, because people actually realize, what were the starting points of this, and in particular, the perspective that they took, that from that perspective, they've built up a particular belief system that created experiences. And so as they change that perspective, they start to feel, again, their body starts to change and heal. And the biggest thing I also say is that between where it started and what it was about and where it is now, what were the most important experiences that happened that built on it? Because it's not just a matter of where it started, but it's like what built it up for us to understand. And so that's why it's not a, Band-Aid one-time experience, because then you start to move through and work through those different experiences to go, oh, okay, that's how transformation actually works.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about the fact that there's no quick fix and that it's very incremental. I find with everything that that's the case, and it's super frustrating because God, it would just be so much more convenient and easy to stick with if you did start getting results a bit more quickly. It's just so incredibly difficult to motivate yourself to do a daily practice when, like me, you can't really even tell if it's working. You can't perceive it, if it's having any impact for such a long time. And by the time, I've been at it for a while, I generally fall off the wagon because there's nothing motivating me to continue when I don't get any signs that it's actually having an impact. But I also have sought out more kind of like quick fixes in the form of, week-long tantra retreats or personal development trainings, workshops, group experiences where cathartic releases are encouraged. And I've found them to be quite dangerous and a little bit unsafe. I've often talked on the podcast about how I think now I understand that it's quite unethical what a lot of these practitioners are doing, at least in my experience, especially in the sacred sexuality, tantric, neo-tantra space. It's like they're eliciting these big releases and these cathartic responses, or they're trying to awaken Kundalini energy, but they haven't done any of the prep work and actually readied the nervous system to be able to handle that amount of release or activation or energy. And I think that was, I can't be sure, but I think one particular experience in that space, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, was the beginning of some massive health challenges for me that are still playing out. And that, I worked with a network chiropractor for years as well, doing like 2, 3 times a week sessions, and just can't afford it and don't have the time for that. But I think that I really relate to a lot of what you've been speaking about, because I sought out those quick fixes and it was damaging. And now I'm paying the price because I'm still going to have to do it the slow way. But now I've got cumulative, I don't know whether it would be, whether you'd call them wounds or residue or whatever, but there is stuff going on in my body and nervous system that piled on top of the existing stuff I was heading into these spaces to try to heal. And so, yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that and maybe the different stages that happens in healing. Excuse this quick interruption. I'm shamelessly seeking reviews and 5-star ratings for the potty because, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, it's pretty fab, and the more people who get to hear it, the more people I can help with it. Reviews and ratings actually do make a big difference to this little independent podcaster. And it's really easy to just quickly show your support by taking that simple act of either leaving 5 stars for the show on Spotify, or even better, writing a written review and leaving 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts. Or if you're a real overachiever, you can do them both. That would be mad. If you're writing a review, though, just be sure to use G-rated words, because despite the fact that this is a podcast about sexuality, words like sex can be censored and your review won't make it through the gates. Lame. Anyway, I would personally recommend doing that right now while you're a member, just to get on top of it and let me know you're with me on this journey. Thanks, gang. Enjoy the rest of the epi.
I'm actually really glad you said that, because it is such a huge issue in terms of what happens, because once you've been in those experiences where somebody's not really trained, cannot hold space, pushes people to go past their limits into things that people are 100% not ready to deal with, doesn't have the practice of, if I can just say, one of the things that I've learned is how important it is to develop a strong sense of I am before you even go into some of the deeper stuff. You really need to be able to come back to your sense of self and your sense of strength. And what often happens in those types of experiences is that you're left wide open, extraordinarily vulnerable, and you're, like you said, if you're trying to do a Kundalini type of awakening, you have zero understanding of what it is. You have zero preparation. And I've essentially seen people come out of those workshops and their whole nervous system exploded Like they cannot move physically afterwards. It's like all the circuits have been blown up inside of them, or they just cannot even get into their body properly. And then, like you're saying, because that was so traumatic and invasive, then what happens is that their whole body shuts down to another level. And so now, like you were saying, like, you know, maybe your experience is because you're pushed too far too quick, and that was just, you know, you don't have a sense of self to be able to work with that. You then go into an intense self-protect mode, which then goes, well, I'm not going to feel anything because feeling's unsafe. And you don't even know that you have that belief, but it's like it's your body going, I have to protect myself because I can never allow myself to be in an experience like this again. And then you don't trust anyone, including yourself, because your body didn't, you know, it went too far. And all of these things, which is why I'm so against it, right? And I always say to people, I don't push, I don't force anything, including with breath. You know, I don't believe in forced anything, because I've also at the beginning of my journey done that and seen you know, where it leads. I don't think I've ever pushed people to what I know you're talking about, because I've been in those courses, you know, especially when it comes to sexuality, and there's zero boundaries there, and you end up being incredibly traumatized and thinking, I'm never ever going to go back to this. And there's no, you know, the screaming and shouting and crazy stuff that goes on there. So I, you know, totally, I think, relate and understand. And I think your other question was about the stages of healing, not understanding it. It's like, in an experience like that where you're being pushed and forced into it because the facilitator thinks that they're succeeding because you're screaming and shouting, going crazy, which is just lack of training, essentially, and understanding of how to work with people, and understanding of the stages, like you were saying, that every single person is in a different stage of healing at different times. And I see things as about 8 stages, and I don't know if you want me to go through them quickly or just kind of.
Yeah, like really briefly give us like the Sparks notes on each stage and what that's associated with.
So we begin the healing with the stuckness, right? Like, I am stuck and I just want somebody to fix me, in that sense, because stuckness is that language of the body that says, hey, you know, and we often feel in that first stage that we need an instant solution, and usually a medical one, because we, you know, something is scary and it's going on and it's like, I need it now. And, you know, so we struggle, we suffer through that stage. And I feel like as you go deeper into it, you start to go, well, I really, you know, maybe I don't necessarily just want a medical solution, but I still need a solution. I need somebody to fix it. So you kind of enter into stage 2, still really looking for somebody else to fix the, you know, whatever's going on. And you don't have a very strong sense of self. You don't believe that you can do it, but you're starting to go, maybe there is, maybe there's not a magic pill, but I'm still going to look for it. And again, at the beginning of stage 2, there is still thoughts of the magic pill. Like, you're suffering, but you're not in that just shock. You're in that, like, who's going to fix me? And if it's not this person, it's that. And, you know, who's going to, you know, get me better? But there's still very, you know, quite a lack of self-responsibility in a sense. And then as you move into the stage 3, you start to go, all right, I don't really know what this sense of responsibility means, but I have a sense that maybe I need to participate in my own healing in some way or form. And I'm going to start to learn more about it, as opposed to just go to these different, events and not even know anything about the teacher because somebody said it's good, and like what we just said, and just go into this catharsis. I'm going to start to go, hold on, what's logical? What makes more sense? Can I learn a little bit more about my own body? What does it mean to be safe, in this experience? And, how do I start to participate? Because in stage 2, you might, jump into things, or you might be controlling and be telling somebody, I want it faster, I want to push through this, who's more trained than you in a sense. So there could be all sorts of things happening. And then I feel like stage 4 is when you start to step into something where you go, there are parts of me, I need to get to know myself. I need to find out more about myself. And this is where this whole thing about the nervous system comes in, where you go, maybe I'm blocked and stuck. And that actually means that during different stages of development, as well as trauma, I got stuck, and there's a part of me that stopped growing, including if we're talking about, my sensuality, my feminine self or my masculine self, and I'm actually completely disassociated from it. And I may need to start to connect to this part and actually learn about it and start to maybe go, what's the beginning stages of connecting to my body? I need to learn how to connect to my body. I need to learn how to breathe, and start to recognize things and do things slowly, and discover myself. And then, you might from this, I am really taking responsibility by getting to understand and learn things, not rushing, no pushing. You go into stage 5, and stage 5 is when you go, all right, I am ready. My sense of self is stronger. I've prepared myself. I have an understanding. I feel safer. I'm going to do deeper work as it shows up, and I'm going to explore aspects of my, maybe call it shadow side or archetypes, parts of, my childhood, my, victim self. And I'm just going to go through this and be okay that at some point it might get too much, and I'm going to slow it down, but I have a deeper understanding of how things work more. And so hopefully I can find somebody who can guide me, because I don't encourage people to do it on themselves when you have no one supporting you or guiding you, or you can, talk to and understand. And so, as you then go into stage 6, you might go into deeper understandings of healing and yourself and where things come from. And you might feel like, okay, I can do more of this myself. I can now start to create more of a practice for myself. But there's also this sense of things are coming up to the surface, and you're preparing for a release. And based again on past experiences, you'll either push the release down, or you'll go, I'm not ready, I'm too scared because I had this traumatic experience. Or you go, oh, there's some part of me that I need to keep coming back to and exploring and understanding and being kind to. A lot of this is gentle, kind work, until I'm able to release. And then when, in stage 7, when the release comes up for people, this is where, again, you need to have an understanding of, because sometimes the release, if you maybe pushed or jumped a few things, the release can be very unpleasant, and unpleasant enough to get somebody to a doctor or even a hospital. And so, again, it's this constant learning of how do I slow down and connect to myself, and acknowledging. One of the things I'm going to say is acknowledging the small transformations. And this is one of the things that people don't do and don't know how to do, because everyone's looking for this big change, big shift. And I'm always teaching in my work how do you find the most subtle changes? Or you breathed more deeper. Okay, let's celebrate that. Or, you were consciously aware of some part. Let's celebrate that. So it's almost like we build things based on this celebration. And then, in stage 8 is when you've had the release and now you have this new perceptions and opportunities and possibilities, and you go, oh, I feel good for a while. Let me explore feeling good. And then, when I go back to doing deeper work, maybe I'll look at ancestry because I didn't know that. Or maybe I'll look at, feminine, masculine type work. Or maybe I'll look at what does pleasure mean to me. Or maybe I'll look at whatever it is, archetypes deeper, or disease, like really looking at diseases and why did this happen to me? What is the life story? What are the lessons? What are the experiences? But now I'm stronger, and each time you kind of go through it, there is a slightly subtle different awareness and awakening that happens.
And I'm curious, like when you're saying a release happens at stage 7, what can that look like, and why might it wind up with someone in the doctor's office? Like, just to prepare people or give them an idea of, like, in reality, in real time, what would that manifest as?
Can I give an example of someone?
Yeah.
So I actually had I was really good friends with this man, and his name's Lee Grant. And we were, Lee Grant had HIV, and he was losing his eyesight, and he was really getting very, very sick. And he was somebody who had actually been a producer for some massive shows, including Oprah show. And he had a really huge conflict with her, essentially, and ended up on the cover of some pretty big magazines for what you don't want to be on the cover of them for, let's just say. And so he had a big fall. And there was enormous, like incredible amount of trauma and shame around this experience, because he said, like, he went from her being like his mom to essentially being like, you're cut off from everything and you're shamed. I think, he was on the cover of National Enquirer, and he ended up going from making, like $1 million Australian to working for $6 an hour in Walmart. And so it was a big, big fall. And so by the time I met him, he'd done quite a lot of work on himself, but he was still holding on to this whole thing around what happened with Oprah. And I said to him, hey, I'm going to do this 3-day workshop in Mega Institute, which is a few hours from New York, and I really need a helper, and my helper that I was going to have can't come. So I really, I'd love for you to come, and it's tomorrow. And he went, okay, all right. So I was like, we're going to get on the bus and blah, blah, blah. And he was amazing. Like, he did all the research of how we had to get there and so on. And while we were on the bus, I said to him, let's talk about Oprah and what happened to you. And I had known him for a few years by that stage, and we'd become very close friends. And so he said, no, I can't talk about it. You know that I cannot talk about it. And I said, no, I really think since you're actually coming to the workshop, you need to talk about it. You need to talk about what happened. And so he did. And we spoke about it for 3 hours. And then during the workshop, we were doing all sorts of things. And because that part of his life, he had at that point probably suppressed for at least 10 years and pushed down. And I think because I was this safe person, we had a deep friendship. And, by that stage, he was like, hey, I'm going to let go a little deeper with you, but without necessarily knowing what the release is going to be. And so, then, we went home 3 days later, and he was like, I don't feel the best. And I said to him, okay, cool. Just get home, drink water, call me tomorrow, let me know. And so he calls me and he said, look, I've been throwing up all night, which is that potential release. what does this mean? I'm a bit nervous and scared. And I was like, well, actually, in this scenario, it makes a lot of sense. So you just need to, allow your body to do that. Drink water, be very gentle. Don't, don't do anything. Don't push yourself. Just let this kind of pass through. Ideally, don't take medication for it at this point, because your body really needs to transform this. And I was there for this, right? So I was like, I can come over, we can just be very gentle. But if you didn't know, so within, it went on for 3 days for him. So 3 days of the work.
So there's like a purge sometimes, like some sort of physical purge that's the release?
Yeah, exactly. Or a fever, or, all of a sudden you run to the toilet all the time, or, or you might have like really intense symptoms of a cold. Like there could be all sorts of things that happen. The question is, how far is it? And do you have somebody that you can talk to about it? And, sometimes if you take medication, it can explode even more. Or sometimes, there's an infection that actually comes out of your body, and it's like a really big infection, and you may need to go to the hospital for those types of things. So, it's because the body's going, okay, like now I'm trying to let this go. What was really interesting with my friend was that after 3 days, like his vision came back.
Whoa. For permanently?
Yeah. It was like he could
Wow.
see things because he was literally blind. He was saying to me, I'm having difficulty walking around. So it's like his vision came back, and he was able to, like, the symptoms of HIV went right down, and he could take a lot less medication for it. So,
Wow.
it was huge in that experience. But again, you need somebody to communicate with, if it's a really intense one. And I felt safe because I was still going to be in New York afterwards, so I could help him, and he had, direct access. So, again, everyone's different, and we'd kind of moved up to this stage.
Wow. So cool. So cool. Okay, I'm just conscious of time because I've got someone arriving in 8 minutes. So do you mind giving us a TMI story to wrap up with?
TMI, we love it. Said TMI, we love it.
So yeah, this is another thing that I feel like we need to be educated about. We need to be educated about potentially people, lying about STIs or STDs, and actually when you meet them sexually, because, and what questions we should ask somebody when we do that. Because when I met, I'm going to say my second husband, I was so naive because I'd been married to somebody else for 17 years, and and like I had not really gone on dates, and I was really young when I got married, so I really did not know how to date and how to ask somebody those types of questions, which I didn't ask. And then 6 months into the relationship, all of a sudden he said to me, "Oh, I have herpes." And I was like, "Oh my God, wow, like you didn't tell me this."
6 months? Oh my God. Can't believe you didn't bring it up.
Well, yeah, we've been in a relationship for 6 months. You haven't told me this. And, his answer, and he was he's a narcissist, was, which I didn't know at the time, that type of thing as well. He said, well, we'll be together, so what's the difference? It's fine. Except that, I was like, oh my God, how do I know that I don't have it now, and how do I protect myself? And he was like, oh, it's not a big deal, and so on. And so I think, to me, that was such a big traumatizing thing that when we did break up and I started going on dates, and people, some people were asking that question. And I was like, oh my God, shit, I'm going to have to go and get a test on this done. And I'm going to say, I've never talked about this before, but I think it's really important for people to be aware of that when I went and had the test done, and it was literally like the days of waiting, I had connected to shame like I'd never experienced in my life. I literally felt like, oh my God, I understand people who have HIV because I'm not the person, like if I have it, I could never, not tell somebody immediately and also go, oh my God, that is such a heavy thing, to carry. And so, I remember being like literally I couldn't move out of my bed. One of my practices is movement. I was falling down literally as I was moving, like crying and going into that depth of shame. And I was extremely fortunate. I think test results came back clear for me, but the level of stress I went through during that time, and also at the beginning of somebody telling you after 6 months, was pretty horrendous. And I just think that it taught me such big lessons, around safety.
Yeah. Yeah. And that you can't always bank on the other person disclosing something, especially when you're faced with a narcissist or with someone quite toxic or immature. So it really is your responsibility to be bringing up those topics and asking those questions. And I will say, I know that that's a scary prospect when we're wondering whether we have contracted something. But I have an episode about herpes that's really normalizing and validating because it's not the end of the world. So many people have it. I understand why you wouldn't want to get it and that it's nerve wracking. But yeah, if anyone's interested in the herpes episode, that one's really, really awesome. And what we talk about in it is a lot around disclosure and how to have those conversations and the impact that being able to develop the maturity and self-worth in order to have those conversations um, actually was kind of like it was a bit of a blessing in disguise. And so a lot of people that have STIs and need to have those conversations kind of have to level up their communication skills and confidence. And it's also a bit of a vetting measure because when you do bring that up, how the other person responds and where they're able to meet you with regards to their communication and maturity and compassion and kindness and understanding is a really amazing way to collect data about this person and whether you actually even want to relate with them. So I guess you got a taster of that being like, oh, now I actually have to have these conversations every time before I have sex with someone. And so that's kind of a silver lining that came out of that scare. You've leveled up your communication when it comes to this stuff, which is really cool. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it there. I'm going to put a link to your book and your work in the show notes. Is there anything else you wanted to just leave listeners with regards to self-healing or next steps or, maybe a message of hope that we haven't already covered?
Well, I just think that, at the end of the day, the biggest blessing you can have and the biggest thing you can say is that whatever the ailment that you have, whatever the challenge you have, it is an absolute opportunity to get to know yourself and to get to know, what does and doesn't work for you. And, there's so many different techniques and so many different ways of connecting. Some it could be through movement for you, where you feel things, or some people through journaling, some people through, connecting to their body in different ways. I think it's really, really vital to do research and to connect to the person that makes logical sense to you and you have an understanding about them, their journey, what they're about. And also, for me, I would love to invite people to experience like a little mini workshop with me where I, for now, am giving it for free to people and you can find it, I call it a masterclass, but it's more of a mini workshop on my website, innasegal.com, and just look up the masterclasses. There's a few options and they have descriptions about what they are, but it gives you quite a few processes that we've spoken about that we didn't have time to do, and most of those are between 3 and 4 hour long, so that you can go into, this is what Inna means by connecting to the body and awakening and shaking, or asking questions, and or working with a health issue, and going on the journey and just seeing how it feels for you to start to get to know yourself and understand how the body works a little bit more.
Amazing. All right, awesome. I might check that out as well. Thank you so much for your time today, Inna. It's really lovely chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's it, darling hearts. Thanks for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. If you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch, because that's a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism, and you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify, and destigmatize with this here podcast. I'm also always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, questions or guest suggestions, so feel free to get in touch via my website or over on Insta. You can also send me in TMI stories to be shared anonymously on the pod. My handle is FreyaGraff_the Labia Lounge, if my account hasn't been deleted for being too sex positive, which, is always a possibility with censorship. But just in case the chronic censorship finally does obliterate my social channels, I'd highly recommend going and joining my mailing list and snagging yourself some fun freebies for the trouble at www.freyagraff.com/freebies. Anyway, later, labial legends. See you next time.